We snap millions of photographs every single day. Literally, humanity takes more pictures in just 1 week now than in the entire 19th century. But how often do we actually stop to decode what we're looking at? Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're taking a really fascinating visual journey into how art and photography capture the incredible, invisible, emotional depths of family dynamics. We're going to look closely at the artistic choices, the framing, and those subtle little cues that artists and photographers use to translate complex feelings into something we can actually see and touch. Which brings us to a pretty profound question. How exactly do we capture the essence of a parent's bond without using a single word? It's probably the most universally understood human experience out there, right? Yet it is wildly difficult to articulate. It's this crazy mix of joy, terror, protectiveness, and eventually letting go. So rather than trying to explain it with some dry textbook definition, we're going to use 4 highly distinct visual case studies to decode this whole experience. We'll look at raw, real-world photography and then some highly stylized, imaginative illustrations to see how totally different mediums tackle the exact same human emotion. Okay, let's dive into this. Part 1. Tenderness and vulnerability. So, when we think of early parenthood, those immediate feelings that pop up are usually overwhelming tenderness and, frankly, a stark realization of vulnerability. Look at this shot. The photographer went with a macro perspective here. They completely removed the faces and the background to force our attention right onto that physical connection. Notice those textured, weathered lines on the adult hand underneath? It forms a literal cradle, a secure foundation. I mean, if you've ever held a newborn, you know the feeling. It's kind of like holding a delicate, unexploded piece of porcelain. And resting inside that strong, weathered hand is the perfectly smooth, unblemished skin of the infant's hand, peeking out from that bright green sleeve. Plus, nestled right in the center, clasped by those tiny fingers, is a single, delicate daisy. It's amazing how the artist uses these tiny macro details to tell such a rich story without showing us a single facial expression. What we're really looking at here is juxtaposition. It's tremendous strength meeting extreme fragility. Just let the emotional weight of that settle for a second. That tiny daisy, it isn't just a pretty prop. It's a visual amplifier. It echoes the pure fragility of the baby holding it. Think about it. To hold a flower without crushing it takes immense restraint, just like that adult hand underneath needs immense, controlled strength to safely cradle the child. This right here is the essence of early parenthood visualized. It's the overwhelming protective strength you absolutely need to nurture something so fragile, set right against that soft heart-patterned fabric in the background, whispering of home and safety. Moving right along to part 2, protection in changing times. Now, as kids grow up, that gentle, static tenderness has to evolve, right? It transforms into active protection in a real world that is complex, moving, and honestly, sometimes unpredictable. The physical cradle becomes more of a psychological and social shield. And what's really interesting about this portrait is how firmly it anchors us in a very specific recent moment in time. We've got a father kneeling down to match his young son's height. They're in this busy room, surrounded by people, bathed in this warm, almost nostalgic light. But the thing that immediately jumps out, they're both wearing protective face masks. The dad has the solid black one, and the boy's mask is covered in bright comic book superhero graphics. This captures a highly specific and challenging historical era of parenting. It perfectly shows the parental bond adapting to a global crisis, blending that everyday routine of a community gathering with the undeniable reality of external threats. Let's break down the distinct visual markers here that ground us in reality. First off, those matching face masks act as a visual bond. They're quite literally navigating this strange new world together. Second, look at the boy's structured scouting uniform, complete with the neckerchief. And third, those achievement badges proudly displayed on his sleeve. That uniform is deeply symbolic of preparedness, learning, and navigating the world. And finally, check out the father's posture. He's kneeling to be exactly at eye level, with his arm wrapped securely around the boy in this close, guarding stance. They aren't just passively surviving an external challenge. The dad is actively teaching his son how to exist within it. He's standing as a literal, physical buffer between his child and the rest of the room. Let's switch gears and see how this builds in part 3, stylized visions of guidance. So we've spent some time looking at photographic reality, the literal capturing of skin, fabric, and specific points in history. But art also expresses what we feel on the inside. By transitioning into idealized illustration, we can see how completely different artistic styles convey the exact same motif. On the left, we have this digital vector illustration. It uses flat, calming pastel colors, greens, yellows, soft blues, a dad and his young daughter, holding hands, walking down a winding green path. It feels sunny, optimistic, and deeply safe. Now look on the right. We see the exact same action, but executed in this dramatic, moody watercolor. The figures are just dark silhouettes, stripping away any specific identifying features. A father and son holding hands, walking toward the stunning, bleeding sunset of purples and fiery oranges next to the water. The motif is completely identical, a larger figure physically leading a smaller figure through a vast natural landscape. Yet the emotional resonance of each piece is entirely unique to the style the artist chose. And this brilliantly illustrates a fascinating comparison: realism versus idealism. Like we saw earlier, photographs anchor us. The image of the baby's hand, or the father and son in masks, those tell us exactly when and where. They're fleeting, real-world moments permanently locked in time. But the illustrations we just looked at on the white do something entirely different. By stripping away the specific details, like turning a face into a silhouette or a path into a sweeping vector graphic, they elevate the bond to a timeless, universal mythos. They aren't just one specific father and child anymore. They represent every parent and every child, stepping forward together into the vast unknown of the future. Which brings us all together in Part 4, the universal journey. Whether we're looking at the weathered skin of a hand, a masked face in a crowded room, or a silhouetted figure walking into a painted sunset, we're actually looking at chapters of the exact same story. Visual art perfectly maps the emotional timeline of parenthood into a cohesive arc of guardianship. Let's recap. Step 1, nurturing profound vulnerability. That was our delicate daisy and the cradling hand, representing the static, intense protection of infancy. Step 2, shielding and preparing for reality. That was the boy in the scout uniform with the mask, the active real-world guarding as a child starts interacting with society. And finally, Step 3, leading safely into the unknown. Those were our illustrations, the parent holding the child's hand, walking down the path or toward that sunset, which represents the ultimate goal of guiding a child forward into their own life. Now, understanding these visual cues is absolutely crucial. Why? Because it completely changes how we process the media we consume every day, and more importantly, how we look back at our own family memories. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a thought to chew on. Which medium, the raw photograph anchored in gritty reality, or the stylized illustration representing a universal mythos, best reflects your own lived experience of this universal bond? I highly encourage you to go back through your own camera rolls tonight, or just look at the art hanging in your home, but do it with this new analytical lens. Ask yourself, what story are those visual details really telling? Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the art of family dynamics. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and I'll see you in the next explainer.